Welcome to another Triad InfoSec webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence and cybersecurity. And you might be asking yourself, what the heck does emotional intelligence and cybersecurity have to do with each other? And so we focused in on one issue today and one issue only, and that is phishing. If you don't know what phishing is, that's when somebody sends you a fake email with a fake link and you click on it and all of a sudden bad things start happening. And what we've noticed here at Triad InfoSec is that 80 to 90% of breaches occur through a human. And all they have to do is not click on that bad link. So we want to talk about emotional intelligence and figure out if there's something we can do within the leadership realm to prevent this from happening. And in order to do that, we've invited Jevon Wooden, a world-renowned speaker, leadership consultant, general guru of all things cybersecurity, military, and leadership. So, Jevon, without further ado, would you please introduce yourself, sir?
Man, you have set the bar very high, Josh. Not just kidding, man. What's going on, guys? As Josh said, I am Jevon Wooden. Honored to be here. I spent, oh man, probably 15 plus years in the cyberspace. That includes the military. And now I have a company called Bright Mind Consulting Group, where we focus on leveraging emotional intelligence to help improve the performance of leaders in organizations.
Awesome. Awesome. Wonderful. And if you've joined us for a webinar before, you've probably met the man, the myth, the legend. But Jason Roy, go ahead and tell the folks who you are.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Jason Roy, founder, CEO of Triad InfoSec. We're a cybersecurity compliance and risk management advisory firm. And yeah, we're here today welcoming Jevon with us and hopefully drop a little bit of education for everybody on how to keep everything safe.
Wonderful. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have both of you. So my name's Josh. I am here to ask all the crazy, difficult, weird questions that you may have in your head. If you have a question today, please put it in the chat and we'll try and get that answered live on the webinar. If we don't, we'll happily send you an email with the answers to your questions or set up a one-on-one for you. So without further ado, I'm a military guy. I don't think there was much emotional intelligence in my training. It was go do this and be quiet. What is emotional intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, emotional intelligence in essence is the ability to understand and process your emotions and that of others. And what that looks like is, I agree, there has not a lot of emotional intelligence in the military. What that looks like is not being soft. It's not saying, oh man, you can run all over me. A lot of people misconstrue that. So I wanted to put that out there right away. It's really just processing and understanding it from another person's standpoint. Why was that the decision they made? How are they going to accept the decisions that we make? And how does that impact them? That's really what it is in essence. And then on the self side, it's being able to hold yourself accountable, be authentic, acknowledge mistakes, be vulnerable, and be a fantastic leader, right? So in essence, so I'm excited to talk about this under the lens and guise of phishing, because I think this is going to be a very interesting conversation.
Yeah, you got my wheels spinning already. So, regarding phishing, if emotional intelligence tells me why somebody does this, why do people click on the things? Why they know not to? They've gotten the training, they've clicked on it before and gotten the 45-minute watch this video and learn better. Like, why do they keep doing this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it like this, I look at it also from a marketing standpoint, because this is the same thing that marketers do. They put that sense of urgency in, they make it so that they have credibility by acting as if there's someone that you should know, or of importance. I mean, even if you don't know them. And then when you're doing other things and you're not really paying attention, you're trying to multitask, you're like, oh, shoot, you know what? I might have forgot to do that. Let me go ahead and do this thing. And they just catch the people at that right time. And a lot of these phishing campaigns, they're getting a little better, right? So now you even got to check if the email is legit. So you got to click the little drop down to say, is this actually this person? Right? Because it's so easy to kind of manipulate everything else, and they don't have to write this stuff on their own either, because now you have AI that you can just say, hey, write this email for me that says these things, and then tweak it a little bit. So you don't have to worry if English isn't your first language. So there's those grammatical errors we're used to seeing, and the context clues that kind of guide us a little bit. All those things that are kind of being wiped away because of this new technology that now that the adversaries are using.
It's getting kind of crazy, you know. Before I could tell pretty easily, right? Like, hey, him, I think maybe exclamation mark you, Nigerian prince, send me money, and like that was obvious. But now I don't know. So Jason, what are we seeing as far as transformation? I know Jevon mentioned a couple of different tools that the bad actors are using. What's the
Yeah,
steps in resiliency?
I mean, he hit it on the head. I think he kind of writes my awareness training for me. I don't know if I could have really said it any better. And he is absolutely right. From the sense of urgency, just like the meeting we had, I don't know, a couple of days ago, where organization fell victim to a phishing email, led to a mailbox compromise, led to emails going out of the CFO's mailbox to vendors with fake bank information, wiring information. And we, kind of understood from him that it came from a place of urgency. If you see chief whoever, executive officer, chief financial officer, if it's, one of the top brass in the organization sending you an email saying you need to do this now, you're going to do it. And to Jevon's point, which is dead on, people are so busy these days. Just, life is crazy. We all move at 100 miles an hour. Now we all work from home, and you have all these distractions around you, possibly wife, children, your pets, your TV, all these things that well, again, can just simply distract you. So if you're a little bit distracted, you see an email come in with the right name of your CEO that says, do this or send this, chances of you doing it are extremely high. And if you actually go and you look at the statistics behind phishing, ransomware outbreaks, insurance payouts, when COVID hit, look at the numbers, because that's when the work from home transformation happened. And the bad actors cashed in on that. They cashed in on the distractions. They cashed in on the weaker security measures by people using their personal devices, for company purposes. So that was a massive spike, and it really hasn't stopped. And again, great point on AI. I've said the exact same things in some of the talks I've done. Yeah, the days of the grammatical errors that are easy to see, they're long gone. AI can punch out one of the most realistic emails. The technology behind spoofing domains and email addresses has improved. I mean, there's ways where, some bad actors can actually get emails to come through outside of a mailbox compromise, where it actually blankets the actual domain. It's no longer misspelled. I mean, it's the actual domain. It may not have sourced from that domain, but it's spoofed well enough. So if you've got the actual person's name, the actual person's email, a very well-written, articulated body of the email used by AI to clear up any grammatical problems that someone would have if English is not their first language. You put all these things together, man, I mean, it's really hard, for someone not to fall for it. So that's why, for what we do, as you know, Josh, that security awareness training is, kind of first and foremost in our portfolio of services, because without that, and I know that's what's leading into this talk about emotional intelligence and phishing and training and getting the culture shift within these organizations to slow people down mentally, to say, that's a little awkward. My CEO wouldn't normally ask for that, especially at 2:30 in the morning when he's asking for Google Play gift cards. It's just not right. But, not to get all frantic because you think it's actually the CEO asking for it. You take the time to stop and use some type of verification method, whether it's call the CEO, text the CEO, if you have that capability, but just verify it with someone before you take action. Because, that one simple step of verification, that with that little bit of slowdown, can, save your organization, a lot of heartache.
Okay, so we want to get people to slow down, and we've talked about the fact that if they get an email from the boss, they're going to be urgent and they're already distracted. How do we get inside their head? You know, Jevon, how do I frame the training other than this is what you need to do so that they actually slow down?
Yeah, I mean, it really boils down to one is culture, right? What is the culture of the organization? Are they the hurry up and get it done type of organization? The leaders yell at people when they don't do things in an expedient way. So that's one of the things, that's one of the easiest ways for leadership in an organization to kind of change how things are being done is to say, hey, it's okay if you double check before you do this thing that seemingly is harmless that can actually cause millions of dollars of harm in reputation and financing, right? So you have to give them that agency to say, hey, it's okay. And you may even want to put in a check system, right? You may even want to say there's a two-person system. So if you get this email, you're like, hey, let me call and confirm before I go ahead and send this stuff. So that's really how you'll do it in the military, as you know, Josh and Jason, train as you fight.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure it's repetitious and it's not just a computer-based training that you're saying, oh, yes, here's what you look for, right, when it comes to phishing, or here's what you do. You want to make sure you're doing like tabletop exercises, want to make sure you're walking them through these things sporadically. The phishing training, we know there's a ton of system stuff, and you all do it as well, where you go through these exercises and people may not even know they're actually in that exercise because the phishing emails are so great. But you can hit the little button that says, hey, this is phishing, I think, and have somebody view it. So you just have to give them the agency to be able to do these things without having to have consequences, because maybe they delayed sending in a legitimate process or document out just to make sure that it was okay.
Yeah, no, that's great, and that does remind me of when I was in the military, doing communications and dealing with a lot of the cryptography that the Navy used to encrypt signals between the ships, and we followed a process called two-person integrity to get into the safe that held the cryptography equipment. There would be two people would have to unlock that safe. Two people would have to sign the log. Therefore, giving you that ability to make sure that no one's getting in the safe, unnecessarily, right? So kind of not the same, but the same. If you think about, if there is the checks and balances, when it comes to verification, and building that into the normal process. And I know a lot of organizations, especially ones around IT support, are starting to build that in. They're starting to really do kind of two-factor authentication on human beings. So if you call in to the help desk and request a password reset, then you'll be sent some type of code or email to read back, to then verify that ask before they actually do it, because that's another big thing. And we can talk a little bit about that. I'd love to hear your takes on it, Jevon. I mean, outside of email phishing, voice cloning, voice phishing, deep fake videos, social media, all these various social engineering tactics are on the rise, because I think email phishing is never going to go anywhere. I mean, it's number one by far, and it probably always will be. But as people start to understand phishing and how to detect the emails, that'll slow down a little bit. So these bad actors are finding new avenues to manipulate people, and they're doing it old school, over the phone, through text messages. I mean, Josh just recently got a text message from a bad actor that had my name on it. So just these things are, they're starting to run rampant. So it's really kind of a crazy world to think that you have to put multi-factor authentication on human beings, but I really feel like that's where we're at.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree, man. I mean, the tech, you mentioned text, man, it's getting insane because it costs them nothing to do these things. It's like the cost of all of this stuff, they hit a button and it just goes. So it doesn't even really matter. If they miss, all they need is one,
Yeah, that machine gun approach is wild. So tell me about the implementation, right? And then don't worry, Jevon, I'm coming back to you with emotional intelligence after we get through this one.
No
But, okay, the CFO sent an email out to 1,000 employees and vendors and everybody. You telling me that he needs to be available to answer the phone 1,000 times for every email that he sends out? Like, what process do we put in place in order to help verification without clogging the pipes? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, I mean, that's a tough one. Yeah, because those guys send a lot of emails with a lot of sensitive information. And yeah, if he had to then turn around and verify every email that he sends with particular instructions in it, yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother assistant position right there just to verify on his behalf, which is unrealistic. Let's be real. But I think that maybe it's one of those things that has to happen in the beginning, but you use that as leverage to train and to make that culture shift, that mental shift to where, okay, I get it now. I know what to look for. And then you just kind of have to go back to having that faith in the systems, that faith in the training, that faith in the individual, that they're doing what they're supposed to do, and they understand what to look for. They understand the see something, say something mentality and security in an organization's everyone's responsibility type way of thinking. So that's my take on it.
Okay, it sounds like the government to me, right? Like the government moves a little bit slower than private enterprise, but part of that is because of the chain of command. And so if you get something that you're not sure of, you call your boss, he calls his boss, and eventually the CEO or CFO gets a couple of calls. The assistant verifies and it comes back down. So it may take an hour or so to get the verification through, but that's better than having a mistake.
Yeah, no, it's
okay.
Very true, very true.
Okay, so Jevon, here's my home run question for you, brother. The C-suite tends to be the worst offenders from what I can tell. And we've talked about, if we can change that cultural shift, we've got something moving in the right direction. But how? I mean, please tell me, how do we get the C-suite to buy in and practice what they preach?
Just like with everything, if you can tie it to something tangible for them, something they care about, and they may all care about something different. CFO cares about the bottom line. Let them know, like, hey, you make this one mistake, you see this profit, it's going to dwindle down and it's going to be in the red because you're going to have to pay all these fees and have all these lawsuits coming in and your reputation is going to suck, right? So CEOs, processes, and all that other stuff and keeping the organization goes, well, guess what? It comes to a grinding halt if we make this one little mistake. Yes, it may seem like it's nothing, but it is absolutely something. So they need to model the behaviors they wish to see. I know a lot of CEOs are like, oh, I can't be bothered with that, this extra step that I need to take because I have to move at this pace. But if everyone sees them utilizing the technologies and the systems and the processes that they're looking to implement on the ground floor, then they're more inclined to do the same because they're saying, okay, I'm seeing them do these things, so why can't I do it? No matter how busy I am, I can only imagine how busy the C-suite is. Right. So if you model that behavior, that's one. The second thing is modeling with the behavior has to be backed up with some documentation. So you have to have the processes, procedures, the guidelines, all these things in place to make sure that when someone comes in, if they're onboarding or if they've been a vet, that they have to review these things occasionally. And if they don't, then what's the repercussions, right? If we do catch you with one of these phishing exercises, hopefully it's an exercise, what happens, right? Do you just go through remedial training? Do you get 3 strikes rule? So it has to be something to really show and demonstrate the severity of what can take place here. So that ties back to being an empathetic leader, right? An empathetic leader is going to be leading by example because they don't just talk, they do. That's part of being authentic and transparent. The second thing is the communication aspect. It needs to be in everything we do. Right. And we need to make sure that everyone understands how it ties into their role. So we are going to empower those frontline leaders to go ahead and do what they need to do to ensure that the training is done, ensure that their people understand the gravity of making that mistake, and ensure that they know the consequences of if they do make that mistake. And then there's this component of champions, right? having people who may not necessarily be in the background of cybersecurity, but maybe they can learn a little bit and go through the training to ensure that every so often some training is ran, maybe quarterly, right? To make sure that people are staying on top of things. Maybe you have some software that's implemented so you could test and then give that remedial action to the person who actually clicks. So there's a number of different ways, but it really has to start with being modeled by that C-suite.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So help me out with some of my emotional intelligence here, because I have a tendency to just call it like I see it. If I were to
That's
walk
not a
into a
bad thing.
C-suite and talk to a CEO and tell him everything you just told me, right? That this is a major risk, that what's going to hold you accountable is the fact that you may crush your own company if you don't do this. But beyond that, got it. Come back 6 months later for a tabletop exercise. They're still not doing it all. They've had the speech. How do you think a CEO would react if I said, are you a leader here, or are you just calling yourself a leader?
So I wouldn't go about it that way. I would just
This is why I'm asking for your help.
So there's risk acceptance, right? By them not doing the actions that they have by proxy accepted the risk, right? So you got to ask them like, hey, are you, I see that you're still not leveraging what we spoke about last time. So are you willing to accept the risk? Because by proxy, you not taking that action is doing that. So you got to ask them that tough question. Are you willing to accept that risk? Because that's why we're implementing all these things. And if they say yes, then what can you do? You don't own it, right? The ownership is on them, and the onus is on them to go ahead and make sure that they're ready for these things. So as consultants or as the CISO or whoever it is, you can give all of the information necessary and tell them exactly what needs to be done and the resources you need to get it done. But if they do not hold it and own it like they need to get the ball rolling, that's on them. But when that attack does take place, I mean, then they'll have no choice because they probably won't be in a position for very much longer.
Yeah, that's a great point. Jason, what's your take on that? I mean, you're the man with the plan around here. You talk to a bunch of C-suite folks. But
yeah, no, I mean, Jevon, no, he's absolutely right. I mean, risk acceptance, I mean, is the thing. You either accept it by proxy, like Jevon said, by really not doing what you should do. I mean, ultimately you want to end up at risk acceptance by we've done everything we can. Everybody's following all the rules. We cannot mitigate any more risk. We've transferred what residual risk we found within the organization, and we've landed at risk acceptance. That's the destination most organizations want to be at. And that's whatever allows everybody to sleep well at night. Now, yes. So back to your question. I mean, if the CEO is just dead set on not following the rules, and I've seen it more times than I can count, the rules don't apply to me. You got to do what I say, but I'm not going to lead by example. I don't want a complex password that changes every 90 days. I want my lowercase password with a number 1 at the end, and it never changes and never expires and never does anything, and auto logs me in, and does all my work for me. That's their mentality. So yes, I mean, you can explain it until you're blue in the face, what the threats are behind not following the rules, and trying to get them to understand you're the CEO. You don't want the rules to apply to you, but you're also the largest target in the organization. So by not following the proper security measures, or maybe even more measures than the rest of the staff to protect your identity and protect the systems that, ultimately tie to you, such as your email or your social media profiles, LinkedIn, whatever, then yeah, you're setting yourself and your organization up for great risk. And I mean, if you're just dead set on not doing these things, again, yes, you are accepting that risk. And when something happens that grew from you not participating in those security measures, then you're going to own it. You're going to be left holding the bag. And like Jevon said, you either won't be around much longer, or the organization won't be. And if a CEO really is willing to jeopardize, the livelihood of that organization and the staff that he leads because he doesn't feel like the rules apply to him, then how effective of a leader is he really?
Yeah, I think we're on to something interesting. So, Jevon, can you help me understand the CEO that the rules don't apply to me? Yeah, how are they making decisions? Like what makes them push those buttons?
Well, you know, the term narcissistic leadership comes up, right? Feeling like they just know everything and they're untouchable, and that things just need to go their way or it doesn't go at all. And those are the same leaders that get in trouble because they also feel like they need to have all the control. So though that's what's common that we see. And it's really Jim Collins talks about it in Good to Great. He talks about the level 5, the level 1s, those types of leaders. So we never see one of the great leaders, those 4s and 5, be that type of leader, right? Because the great leaders understand that one, they shouldn't have all the control, right? Because that's why you have other leadership and a whole leadership team, and also your frontline managers, and that's also why you hire the people who are experts in their roles. And then the second thing is, those leaders, they tend to have hard heads. So they tend to learn the hard way. And as cyber experts, you you just cannot personalize it and you cannot internalize it because you're doing your job by telling them exactly what is going to happen, what could happen, and how it needs to be mitigated so that we really lessen the threat landscape of what the adversaries are going to go for. So that's just how you have to do it. If that leader is that way, and all of the leadership has said and agreed and bought in to what you were saying, and that one person is just like, nah, that's there's nothing you can do about that, and we just have to call it what it is.
Yep, absolutely. And, and as a consultant, if you kind of look at it from the other angle, if you're consulting, let's say you're a VC, so you take it outside of the actual organization, you're consulting, trying to help them through. And if you run into that scenario, and I can put myself in this bunch, and I know a lot of other professional VCSOs, cybersecurity consultants who, if they run into scenarios like this, where they can't get executive level buy-in or executives don't want to follow the rules, they're not going to attach their name to that risk. So they're going to walk. And rightfully so. I mean, if you can't get the main people in the organization to follow what you're trying to advise them to do to mitigate risk, then you shouldn't want part ownership of that risk, because who's to say something doesn't happen? A lot of fingers get pointed, when incidents happen, whose fault was it? So yeah, it's just for me, I would walk away.
Okay. That kind of half answers my follow-up. I read an article, I think you sent it to me this morning, Jason, about kind of private equity firms and insurance, and it mentioned in there the CISO's liability, that they could personally get sued if something happened because it's their responsibility. So for the full-time CISOs that may be tuning in or catch some of the video later, if their CEO isn't listening and they've got everything in place, but they're the ones that ultimately accept the responsibility of the situation, what do you do?
Document. Yeah, I mean, what brought that to light was a SolarWinds CISO. We all heard that story where the SEC actually filed suit against him personally for the SolarWinds breach. I believe they end up releasing or dropping the charges against him personally, if I remember correctly, and I could be wrong, but that did bring light to that situation, to where our CISOs within organizations, true CISOs, not VCSOs, not consultancies or people on payroll, for the organization guiding security, are they personally responsible in the event of a breach? And I think that it's tough, because there's a lot of gray, there's a lot of muddy water when breaches happen on exactly what happened was, until a deep forensic dive and root cause analysis is performed to know exactly what happened. And is it an individual's fault at that point? It could be, it could not be. It depends. I think if a CISO is following all the rules and he's driving the program the way that he should, testing the program, continuously improving the program, based on the way the threat landscape changes, then I think he'll be okay. if you got the lazy CISO who's like, whatever, just collecting a check, he's not really driving the program, driving improvement, leaving a lot of archaic solutions out there, not following up on found vulnerabilities, if they're even testing for vulnerabilities, then that materializes into an incident or a breach, then yes, he could be found negligent because he ultimately wasn't doing his job.
Okay.
That's my 2
So
cents.
that's a really good point though, right? Having a documentation, having the trail for what you need, what you're trying to do, so that if for some reason you do get sued, you're like, no. Look, I've done everything that I'm supposed to do. I'm in compliant with every single thing. This goes down, it doesn't go up.
Yeah.
So Jevon, that makes me curious. When you're talking about emotional intelligence with different firms and leadership, do you talk documentation with the conversations that they're having with their employees based on the emotional intelligence that they're trying to execute and implement?
Yeah, I mean, you know, when it comes to emotional intelligence, it really is conveyed in the policies, procedures, and everything that you do. Should be in the bylaws of the organization on how that is conveyed. You don't necessarily have to say, "Oh, we're an emotionally intelligent organization," but what you're saying should convey that. So, how you support your people, you know, what training, how you develop leaders. Is there a succession plan to give other people opportunities? All that is a way to show emotional intelligent culture. And it does nothing but help what you have going on. So in this case that we're referring to, where the CISO, you know, is locked up or charges get brought against them, that should not be, you know, unless they were just completely negligent, as Jason was saying, like they're not driving a program and they're just like, oh, we haven't done anything. That CEO should probably step in and be like, hey, you know what? My bad, right? You know, this person did tell me some things, but here's what we're going to do better next time, right? We take full responsibility from the part that we can take responsibility on, but here's what we're going to do better, right? Because if you just leave that CISO out to dry, you're pretty much saying like I had no part in it, and that just can't fly. For one, if you don't become the person that ends up getting charges as the CEO, what happens is you become an organization that no one's going to want to work for. So you're going to lose talent, you're going to lose reputation, you're going to just start fading away into the abyss that no organization wants to be in. And we've seen it over and over and over again in history of companies that were once on the Fortune 500. How many of them are there now if you look at even 10 years ago, right? So that's what can happen if you do not tie in that emotional intelligence into what you do in your everyday operations.
Okay. Are boards of directors paying attention to this type of thing?
A good board of directors should be aware, but I mean, good is relative, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I mean, I've seen some boards that kind of hands off. I've seen some that actually mandate cybersecurity measures from the board level. You know, maybe they cared that much to say, okay, I know we're not in a highly regulated industry, but we still care about the organizations. So therefore, I expect the organization to provide documentation around X, Y, and Z, pen testing, compliance frameworks, alignments, these things. So yeah, that to me, that's a good board. That's a conscious board around understanding cyber and security and how important it is these days, even around industries that don't answer to the higher powers like the financial and medical and DoD space, for example.
Okay. All right. So let me throttle back here for a little bit, and let's go with the assumption that the C-suite is on board, that the culture is there, that there's a CISO or at least a vCISO in-house helping drive the organization. And we've been doing phishing emails for 3 months, and there's 10 people that just keep clicking on it. They've been through the 15-minute video, the 45-minute video. They've even had maybe a meeting with HR to talk about a PIP because it's getting kind of serious. So if I were to bring you two guys in to help with some of the interview process for these folks as a retrain, how would you approach that?
Jason, you want to go first?
No, you go ahead. That's
Cool.
That's a good one though. That's a good
one. Well, first I would ask to not do videos. because people again are busy, and what happens when they turn on that video? They go do something else while that video is playing, and they probably don't remember half or even a third of what was in there. So that's first thing. So I would take it offline and say, okay, video may not be enough. Let me coach these people. Let me ask them, what about those 10 emails or whatever they're clicking is attractive to them, right? And then I would ask, do you remember from that training, if anything? How can we best support you to ensure that this doesn't happen again? That's the key. How do we best support you? Because they may not be able to pick up what's happening. They may not be able to recognize, because in the video it looked different. So we just have to, that's where empathy comes in. That is like, okay, there's something going on here. If it's just these same people, everyone else is not clicking, maybe what we are giving them to support them in this is not clicking. So how else can we go ahead and convey the message? We know it's serious. We put them on a pip, but if we truly want them to be successful, we should coach them up a little more. You might have to take them and get a day or a half day where they truly just immerse themselves in this training. Get someone like Jason to come in and say, hey, all right, here's what phishing is. And here's what keeps attracting you. Like, look at the statistics. Say you keep clicking on ones that look like this. So here's what we're going to do for you. We're going to train you up. All right. We're going to make sure that you know exactly what you're looking for when it comes to this. And we want you to slow down. And we're going to support you on this. And tell them what that support looks like. We're going to give you a month if they have a month, right? We're going to give you a month of support to make sure that you don't do this. But if you do it again, sorry to tell you, but we may have to terminate you, because we just can't afford that as an organization, right? And our organization takes cybersecurity seriously. And cybersecurity, we hear it all the time. It's cliche, but it's true. It's everyone's job, right? So we need you to really hone in on this and look at it as seriously as you do everyday operations in your role.
Good stuff.
Yeah. And I agree. You want to do everything you can by the staff. But if you do have the repeat offenders, and I've done it before. You take them one-on-one session again, to Jevon's point, try to figure out what's driving you to continuously click on these things. Everybody likes cute kittens in the latest Taylor Swift video, man. I get it, but why do you keep falling for it, right? And yes, I mean, you definitely do not want to see anyone lose their job over it, but there are repercussions to not getting it. You got to put as much effort as you can into that person to help find that trigger, to switch their brain to where they do get it or start to get it. But if it continues, there's a problem. The organization also has to understand, are humans, and there's things called compensating controls for that. So your main control is the training. Your compensating control is realizing that not everybody's going to pay attention to it. So that's where your EDR, backups, and all these technical mitigation things that you should have in the organization need to ensure that they're deployed, implemented properly, they're tested. Because when you have that employee that's just not clicking, it's not clicking, but they're clicking the links. And if they click that wrong link, now you're going to rely on that compensating control, which is the technology that can mitigate this threat, to see, oh, that link was just clicked. It went to a very bad place. So the software is smart enough to logically isolate that machine in real time off the network if it determines that something bad is happening. So it's kind of twofold. You definitely want your people not to click. So you got to train, but you got to have the technology in place to back you up. It's just having something to have your six at the end of the day.
Okay, so to me, that sounds like the training is a much more proactive approach. Preventative, maybe, is a better term. And some of the technology is kind of it's the net underneath the trapeze artist, right? It's your backup plan. That's really good information. So regards to training, right? People are going to make mistakes. We've got to train them. How many chances should they get?
That's a loaded question, man.
I
Jevon,
know.
yeah,
That's my
hey.
favorite kind.
I'll let him take that one. I don't. That one's tough.
Well, again, it has to go flow with the culture of the organization, and you have to look at the severity, right? Just like we do everything else, there's a risk matrix that says, okay, they're dealing with this data, with this severity and this confidentiality level. Maybe that's different. So you have to establish it, but whatever you establish, which is up to the leadership, whatever you establish as those amount of times, it should be conveyed to them. No, actually, it must be conveyed to them so they understand, this is severe, and if you do not, first time we're going to verbally warn you, we're going to have you do the computer-based training again. Second time, all right, no computer-based training, we're going to coach you, we're going to actually have someone sit with you who's an expert on this and spend some time with you so you can get it. Third time, who knows after that, but we have to have that in writing, in doctrine, and then we have to hold to it. But that's up to leadership how many times, but it also it should tie to the level of risk again, if you will.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense, right? Own your position, own your responsibilities, right? The level of risk is much more severe for somebody that's sending wiring money than somebody that's hammering nails. That makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about hiring. Are y'all aware of any sort of phishing training or cyber awareness questions that go into a hiring process these days to see if somebody is tracking this before they even begin to work for the organization?
I don't know of any organization that kind of say builds that into the interview process. I mean, it's probably not a bad thing. I would think. I'm not aware. I mean, I've seen a lot around new hires, kind of on the flip side to where people are using bad tactics to get jobs. I mean, we all heard about the KnowBe4 kind of getting duped into hiring the North Korean hacker because he used AI to fake his application and interview process. And luckily they caught him up, injecting malware into their awareness training platform. It's kind of crazy. Think of the irony there. So yeah, but no, I mean, organizations, looking at candidates and maybe quizzing them on, cybersecurity hygiene and, hey, do you know what phishing email is? Can you give me examples of how you would determine an email is phishing versus something legit? So I think it's a great question, a great point. I haven't seen anybody doing it, but maybe if there's anybody out there listening, maybe that is something they should fold into their kind of the talent acquisition process.
Yeah, it's just tough for it because there's so many things you worry about for the actual role. And yeah, it's just a tough thing to kind of bake it into the actual hiring. Now, onboarding, I see it all the time, but it's still not good there either. It's just like I said, that computer-based training is good for people who are actually going to sit through it. But there should also be other ways that we're reinforcing what we're looking for them to learn.
Okay. All right, let's talk about the process and the adoption rate, right? Let's say got a company of 100 people. They had a breach. Luckily, MSP was okay, but they didn't really have any cyber policies whatsoever. How long does it take for them to culturally adopt this from an EI perspective, and how long does it take for implementation from a cyber tool perspective? What are we looking at here for a shift in an organization?
Yeah, Jason, I'll let you roll first on the.
I mean, without much of a cyber posture with an organization that large, I mean, that's an uphill battle. I would think to make the cultural shift, get all the policies in place, and then have all the technology coming in behind it. I mean, that could take upwards of 12 months to really get the foundation laid, maybe even longer. It depends, on the organization, the makeup. What does that organization look like? If they've gotten to that size without really having a decent, comprehensive cyber program, that would tell me that a lot of people set in their ways. So the resistance to change is going to be massive. So again, kind of going back to the consulting, if I was to go up and speak to 100 user company that recently got breached and come to find out that they just really didn't have the cyber program in place, and now they want something, I would pass on that deal.
Well, they're lucky to even be around, to be honest.
Yeah, if they're still around. I don't know.
But
Are they? Now they're limping.
Yeah.
Now they can't afford the proper program anyway. I mean, who knows? Because most likely if they got breached and they didn't have a program, I would only assume they probably didn't have cyber insurance. So, if you're left holding a financial, bag on these type of breaches, which, the numbers are astronomical now. I think I saw a report in the last few days in 2024, depending on the level of revenue, let's just say they were a 10 to 20 million revenue company, coming back from a security incident on average now is about 1.5 million.
Mm.
So that's a decent hit to the pocketbook if you didn't exercise risk transfer and have the proper insurance in place.
Yeah. And then from a cultural perspective, I mean, there's something they say culture takes 3 years, to really, really transform a whole organization's culture. Because again, you have all those components to it. But for someone who was just recently breached to really, they should be motivated, right? So the first thing I'm going to see is how motivated they really are to change the culture. And then I'm going to look at, I would love to do an assessment, like behavioral assessment, to kind of see, the leadership team at least, like what are their patterns and how did they get into this situation in the first place where they have zero cyber posture? Because just like in cyber where you have maturity levels, you have that same thing in cultural transformation. So it sounds like they're at zero. So, we'll look at how we can at least get them to 2, within that 12-month period. And then we can start working on the next maturation process over the next year or 2.
Okay. So we're looking at a multi-year process here for a shift. And it's also important to note that if you haven't had a proactive mindset, the chances of getting good qualified help after you have an incident is slim to none if you can afford it.
Mm-hmm.
So you reap what you sow, I think is a big lesson from that. Aside from the uphill battle that's there. So guys, we got about 15 minutes left. What am I missing here? You guys are the experts in the room. What haven't I asked regarding emotional intelligence and how that affects phishing, how that affects the security of an organization?
Yeah, I mean, I would lean in on that last example you gave, Josh, about how this 100-person company had gotten to that level, but they didn't think about cyber. And I would ask the leaders listening to see, what do they think is the reason why that happened? Was it leadership that didn't allow the psychological safety for someone to say, hey, we need this? What do you guys think about, starting to think about getting the VC? So we're at that level, right? Was those questions broached? Or is it the fact that maybe there's groupthink going on where no one thought about that because they were looking at other things? So we have to look at the thought processes of this organization. And that really comes with allowing diverse thinking and inclusive perspectives to come into the rooms so that somebody's at least thinking about this thing, and then allowing them to actually share that topic. And then I would love to look at, how they prioritize it. If it was said, was it even on the list? Or was it something, John's always saying something like that. Like, we don't need to listen to that. So, those things say a lot about how emotionally intelligent a leadership room and the culture is. So I want people to just think about that, because when I go and do talks, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, empathy and emotional intelligence is cool, but it only sometimes. So like I said at the beginning of this, it's not about being soft. But it's about being vulnerable enough and having humility to say, hey, I want to hear your thoughts. I want to get some feedback from people who we may not always hear from, right? Including the people who are doing the jobs day in and day out, which is actually some of the most important feedback you can get because they're seeing things. So we have to listen to them as leaders, as managers, listen to our people and give them a way to share their insights so that we can take those into account.
Okay. All right. What about you, Jason? What do you think? Are we missing anything here?
I don't think we're missing anything, but yeah, I just want to kind of drive home, emotional intelligence. The way I look at it is a lot of people who fall, if we go back to phishing, for an example, I think a lot of the people who click the links, they do it because it's an emotional decision. So if back to the CEO example, if someone spoofs the CEO, you feel like it came from the CEO with an urgent request, and you like your job, you like the company that you work for, you want to do the best you can for that organization, then that's an emotional decision. Oh, the CEO wants me to do this, and I want to make sure I get it done, for him or her, and as soon as possible, do a good job. So yeah, I'll take care of it. That's all based on emotion, and it's not a bad thing, but it can end up with bad consequences. So you kind of have to take that step back and check a little bit of the emotion and into, okay, well, wait, all right, I do want to do a good job. I do want to take care of the CEO's request, but I want to make sure that I'm doing it the right way and that it's legitimate. And if you look at, that's going to be well more received and appreciated by the CEO that maybe you did step back and verify because maybe you didn't quite understand. To me, that shows that shift in culture, that shift in mindset, that now you get it. Now you're looking for certain things and you're taking security seriously, and you know what to look for, and you're proving that by coming to me and saying, did you really ask me to go get you $3,000 worth of Google Play gift cards? Did you really? No. So, and that's how I see emotion playing into it. Is it can't get wrapped up. You can't be cold, like Jevon said. You can't be that. You need to be emotional. You need to have empathy. All these things need to come into play. But you got to kind of focus on what's best for the organization, and that's slowing down, and verifying. And you won't have to bother the CEO that much that often, because eventually you'll get it, and they'll understand that you get it, and then it'll become just routine at that point.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jason. About the emotional standpoint, and I hadn't mentioned it, but there's really four aspects of emotional intelligence, at bare bones. So you have social recognition, like knowing who you are, having self-awareness. So if I know I'm an excitable person and I tend to want to over deliver, then I may be someone who has to kind of filter that and say, hold on, this doesn't even seem right. Right. So you have to really get to know yourself to truly be emotionally intelligent. And then there's the self-management aspect of saying, I need to be self-control. I need to have discipline enough to do that filtering, to say, let me take a breath. Let me go ask, which now goes into the social, they call it social awareness, right, component, which is the third quadrant. That's where you have the communication side of things, where you're willing to go have empathy, where you're willing to communicate with someone and establish that rapport. And then you have social management, which is the relationships, and that's where leadership and teamwork and collaboration kind of fall in. So it really takes all of those things, and there's as you can see, it can be complex, if you really think about it from that standpoint. But as a leader or as a professional, you just have to get to know yourself, in situations from self and when you are dealing with other people. So when it comes to phishing, if I see an email, I have to think, like, where's this coming from? Where's the impulse for me to want to click this thing coming from? And is it rational? Sometimes you have to ask that question. Is it rational? Have I ever received an email from this person in my life before? Right? Is it in my day-to-day operations? So if you do that, you'll find that you're able to get that interrupt between the thoughts or the action and the way you respond, because we don't want to just react. We want to respond intelligently.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is really helpful. So, okay, we got a couple minutes left. I'm curious if we can do something cool here. What is one question from each of your perspectives that you would ask a frontline employee to gauge the health of their organization? Like for me, it seems, do you love your job? If they love their job, then that opens it up, and they're going to start telling me why. And that at least tells me, even if maybe on the technical side of things, they're not that awesome. They've got buy-in. They're taking care of each other. What pops into your head if you want to gauge the health of an organization?
Yeah, I like the do you love your job? And then you can if it was just one thing, I would ask, what about this organization makes you want to get up and be excited about coming here?
Yeah. Man, y'all got to make me come up with a different question. But no, those are great, and then 100% agree with those. But maybe just adding one to the list, if you want to see what the leadership culture looks like, maybe ask that frontline worker what they think about their manager.
Ooh,
How do you feel about your, whoever you directly report to? Are you, what's your feelings on that? And then if they come back and say things like, man, I wish he wouldn't look over my shoulder so much. Okay, now you got a micromanager, or man, I love my boss. He gives us the freedom to do what we need to do, and he trusts us to do the right thing by the organization. All depending on what this job role is, right? But I think you can see a lot about the organization and their culture, by how some of the frontline and entry level people, think about that next step up, their manager. And they'll probably tell you about how that manager's manager acts, and then you start climbing the ladder from there. So.
That's really interesting. We hadn't really talked about kind of mid-level management driving security.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to recognize that if your team is clicking on emails, you might be the problem. Right? If you're rushing them all the time and all over them, and they are scared to death and just trying to get stuff done, or they hate you and they don't care, like there's some serious stuff there when you start permeating a larger organization to multi-layers of management to go, look, we could isolate this cell of folks that are causing breaches just based on how they're being treated.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, you have a manager that's just tough and in your face and micromanaging, ultimately you're probably only still there because of a paycheck. Let's be real.
Yeah.
So if you're just there to collect a check, why else would you? I don't care what I'm clicking on. I'm just trying to get my job done. I'm here for my 8 hours and let me get home. Versus the opposite of that is where like you guys said, you enjoy getting up, you enjoy coming to work. You know that there's not immense pressure from your boss to do certain things, so you start caring because you want to move up in the organization because you like being there. So you're gonna take care of the company, right? And you're gonna hesitate and think and have that emotional intelligence to do the right thing.
Well, that's why it's so important to know behavioral baselines and how it impacts team dynamics, right? Because if I do have that manager and I understand that this team is really the issue here, then I'm not going to go to just the team members individually. I can just go to the manager and say, hey, as a manager, you have to take extreme ownership. And what we're seeing is your team tends to be the offender. So how can we best support you, and what do you think is going on? I want to know their perspective. Like, what do you think is going on? Why do you feel that your team continuously clicks on these emails? And then that's a chance to also see, are they going to take accountability? Are they going to say, that's my fault. I know I'm not getting the training. I know they've been telling me that, they're a bit overwhelmed by all the workload that we have, blah, blah, blah. Or are they going to say, oh man, they just don't get it, blah, blah, blah. So it tells you a lot by the answers and responses that you get from that leader. But you have to know the baselines of your teams and your people as leaders.
All right. Well, this has been enlightening. That's definitely the word of the day. I really appreciate both of you guys joining us. This has been another webinar from Triad InfoSec, and I would say that the closing thought today is that you can't make somebody care about your security, but you can have a conversation about why they should and help them with resources, with your time, policies, procedures. And if you lead from the front, they're pretty likely to follow you.
Couldn't agree more.
Nice. Agreed.
Awesome, gents. Well, y'all have a wonderful day, and thank you guys for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Until next time.
Absolutely.